Hi, welcome to Exaptive. My name is Luke Tucker. I'm the Director of Customer Success here. I'm going to spend a few minutes walking you through some of the basics of using the Dataflow editor. So in the Dataflow editor, you're going to be building Zaps. These are Exaptive applications, which are basically data applications that are built using our visual programming environment. We'll spend a few minutes looking at what a component is, and then we'll take a look at how the buttons, icons, and different things in the Dataflow editor work. Part of building a Zap is that we'll be putting components on our data flow canvas, and then we'll be wiring those together to create a data flow. So let's take a look at how we would add a component to the canvas. So let's add something like a text box. So if I search for a text box in my component browser here, and I drag this component onto the canvas, notice that it shows up here. It has some inputs and it has some outputs. These are things that I can use to wire it to other components. If I don't understand exactly how the component works, which I probably don't if I haven't used it before, I can look at component info. And this is going to take me to the documentation for each component. This is going to show me what it's meant to do, what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and explain a little bit about the component. So I can wire that component to other things, like, for example, another text box. To wire components together, I can click on one output and drag to another input. And now I have created a connection between these two components. If I want to look at so for example, this options input, I want to look at that component, I can click on an input or double click on the component to get an expanded view. And then I can toggle here between inputs and outputs. There are a few other things that we can add to the Dataflow canvas. So one of those is a merge gate. And so this is a special component in Exaptive that lets us merge different pieces of data together or do basic data transformations that don't make sense in a component. So I have inputs here, so x0 and x1. I can rename one of these to test. Notice that that updates. Then I have an expression that is performed on these different inputs. So this was adding x0 and x1. Now I've changed this to test, so I would update this to test. And so now if I were to input two numbers, one to x0 and one to test, the output would be the sum of those. If I were to put two strings, the output would be the concatenated string. The last thing that we can add to the data flow is an annotation. So if I drag an annotation over, notice that this is this kind of text looking area. So if I double click on this, this is going to open my annotation text box. And this accepts Markdown. If you don't understand what Markdown is, there's an annotation help section. But here we can type something simple like these are my text boxes. And this can help other people understand what my Zap does or what your Zap does. I want to take a little bit more in-depth look at some of the different types of inputs you can have on a component. So remember on our text box, we have this string input, we have a Boolean input, we have an entity input. So this is a more complex, this is kind of like an object or a dictionary where we can send a number of different options in all at the same time. This is made granular, so we can treat these like they're specific inputs, but all of the values in it will be sent together. So placeholder, icon, fluid, and size will be sent all at the same time. So here's another example of a granular input. So I can wire on submit to the text portion of this query entity. And so this entity, again, you can think of it like a JavaScript object or a Python dictionary. All of these values are going to be sent together. These are configuring an API call. And that's going to go get some data for me. If I want to just send something here, I can hit cancel, and then my data comes back. I see this is blue. I have these 25 entities in a duffel. So if I double click on this, we can close that back. So those are granular inputs. The last class of input that I want to touch on is a projected input. And so what this lets us do is map portions of our data onto generally visual dimensions of a visualization. I now have data here. So if I click on this, the full screen, edit the full value, I can see all of the data that came through. And there's some portion of this that I want to view in the word cloud. And so let's take a look at the abstract. So we'll say that our ID is the PubMed ID. We want the text to be the abstract. And we'll set this other ID also to PMID. And so now when we go to the preview and close this, we'll see that our word cloud is set based on the cancer search we did. Now if we want to search for something different, like kidney failure, now we see that our words are more things like renal, kidney, and so on. But I could set this to title. Now this will be performed on the PubMed title, not the abstract. So the title has titles have far fewer words, not surprising, and we can map, again, different portions of our data onto portions of a visualization. Another thing that's good to cover is the different ways that we can run or share our Zap. So we built something that we were proud of and we want to share with someone else, or maybe we want to share it so we can get some feedback. So I built this Zap. Notice I'm still in my template Zap. Now I want to save it, so I'll click Save As. So this is going to prompt me to name my Zap, so let me name it something meaningful. So I'll just call it PubMed Zap. Now notice that this is now saved. If I go to the preview, I still see my search box. If I search again for cancer, I get this because it's set to title still. I can go update this in the Dataflow. But now maybe I want to share it with someone. So I need to publish it now. So I can click Save and Publish. I'll create the 1.0 version. Now this is published, so I can share this. I can either give someone read access where they can use the application, or write access where they can actually make changes to the same application using an email address for someone with an Exaptive account. Or I can change the privacy level, which will either make the component available on the Explore page for people to use, or available on the Explore page for people to actually fork and create their own versions of your Zap. And finally, there is this run button. So this will run the application, and so it will create the live HTML5 web application. So here, if I search for cancer, I get my application. So it's a simple application, but it's an application nonetheless. If you have questions, feel free to either contact us through our Slack channel or send a support request, and we'll be happy to get back in touch and help you out where we can. Thanks again, and have fun building your first app.